Ben Perry has been flying his drone recreationally for 7 years. Recently, he decided to get a special flight operations certificate, allowing him to use his drone or unmanned aerial vehicle for commercial purposes, like aerial photography for farmers and realtors. Perry says the whole process was very frustrating and long. And once he received the certificate 2 months later, other problems ensued.
I was told at which point that once you submit for an SFOC that you're not allowed to fly recreational anymore. Once that happened, I basically got pretty upset and started chatting with them and started looking through all their rules. And the only laws they list for model aircraft is that no person shall fly a model aircraft or kite or model rocket into fireworks display or into the clouds, or as long as it doesn't become a hazard to aviation safety, which after I kind of brought that up with them, they argued with me that, I can't do both. Currently, as it stands, based on our email, is I should not be able to be allowed to fly recreational outside of my property in any of the area that's covered by my SFOC. The other aspect is like, why wouldn't I be able to, like any other person, once I get a commercial license to fly, have the option to be either commercial or recreation based on whether I intend to make money or whether I intend to go out and have fun? Their response was no. I asked them to show me where it says in the rules otherwise, and the response I got was the laws are out of date. They're going to be updated. They're about 20 years out of date, and that this is the only conditions, which was that, I'm not allowed to fly in a hazardous manner recreationally, but it doesn't actually state in there that you can't do both. So at this time, it's kind of a gray area, and it was mentioned that if I wanted to fly recreational inside the zone, that I might have to take those matters up with the court in order to have a decision made.
To get some clarity of how Transport Canada is handling these issues, we've reached Sterling Cripps. He is the Chief Operating Officer at the Canadian Centre for Unmanned Vehicle Systems in Alberta. Sterling is also part of a Transport Canada working group that is helping to develop rules and regulations. Sterling joins me on the line now. Hi, Sterling.
Hi, good afternoon, Craig.
Sterling, we just heard there from Ben Perry. How common is it that you hear complaints like that?
Well, this is the first time I've actually heard that his side of the story, and I'm not going to get between Transport Canada and Mr. Perry, but I'll just clarify for your listeners that the CCUVS is at arm's length from government. We're not an actual government agency, but we're facilitated to help the growth of the industry. Now, having said that and heard to Mr. Perry, he's done the right thing. He's gone out to get an SFOC. If you want to fly a UAV in Canada for commerce, you need what is known as a Special Flight Operating Certificate. 10 years ago, Transport Canada wasn't prepared for the onslaught and the explosion of growth of this micro and mini UAV technology industry as we see it now, which has really presented itself in the last 24 months. So they've been inundated in all regions across Canada, particularly the PNR based out of Winnipeg. They've been dealing with over 300 applications a year. And this is unprecedented, but they've done very well to manage them. And the CCUVS part of what we do, we write SFOCs for companies or individuals that might need the help, because it is a bit weedy when you get into the Canadian aviation regulations as how to go about and fill these out.
Tell me about the weeds. How deep are they?
It's not too bad. What there's a staff instruction that the inspectors use, the Transport Canada inspectors use, to cross-reference an application. So if you're going to fly, you have to really identify who you are, where you're going to operate, what you're going to operate, how you're going to do it, and mitigate all the safety and all the operational requirements that would make it a safe operation in order not to harm or endanger any aircraft or persons on the ground.
It sounds rather reasonable at this point, but I've heard from multiple sources that it's actually rather complicated, far too complicated, more complicated than it should be.
Well, it is for now. I can't disagree with that because I've written probably close to 100 SFOCs now over the past 4 or 5 years to understand what they have to go through to make sure that an operator claims who he is and is capable of operating safely in order not to endanger the public. So, yeah, for someone who hasn't had to work with the bureaucracy as such to get into the Canadian aviation regulations, follow the staff instructor's guides, it could be a little overwhelming. But if you really boil it down, it's not too bad, but it does take a little bit of work. And once you develop a rapport with your inspector for whatever region it usually moves quite smoothly.
Tell me about this concern. We've covered this on this show a couple of times. We've heard about drones being flown, for example, too close to airports. And the argument is sometimes made that because of these regulations being out of date, being a little bit too complicated, that discourages people from actually getting the licensing they need and also the training that comes along with it to operate drones safely. How concerned are you about that?
Oh, terribly concerned. I mean, that comes down to public responsibility. You can go to a car dealership and buy a car and not get it registered or get it insured or registered. And you can go drive it on the highway. That happens. And what we're seeing is that's happening today with people who don't know any better are buying these systems off the shelf, online, from overseas, or even within our own continent, bringing them home, taking them out of the box, and flying them merrily along. That is not allowed. If you check most municipal bylaws, towns, cities, hamlets, and villages, there's usually a bylaw written in there that you're not allowed to fly in the day model aircraft in and around populated areas. So that's a responsibility of individuals. And people that go out and do that are certainly endangering lives and endangering a portion of the industry as we're trying to grow it.
You talk about how this should all become less complicated over time, but you also talk about how there are long lineups. There's a huge demand, a surge in demand to obtain this licensing. How much more quickly do you think Transport Canada needs to move here?
Well, you know what? I've got good news on that front because Transport Canada, out of the Winnipeg office, the PNR, which is the largest region, the Prairie Northern region, it's advertised for a 20-day turnaround, which is 4 weeks. That seems reasonable to me. But they did get up to 4 months earlier this year and part of last year. But they've really carved that down. They brought in new inspectors. They've added personnel to help process these things. So it is getting better. So I suspect if Mr. Perry, and he's done the right thing, if he did apply maybe a year or so ago, even as close as 9 months ago, there was a formidable waiting time. But I'm working with clients right now that are getting their SFOCs within 3 to 4 weeks in this region. You can go to the Maritimes and probably get one in 10 days, and same with BC. The BC region is very quick because the demand is not so high. But it's like I say, this technology has just taken great leaps and bounds and have become very, very busy here in this region.
What, as part of your role as an advisor, as working with Transport Canada, trying to develop new regulations, what would be at the top of the list? What would be the most important thing you'd want to see as part of getting licensed properly to operate drones safely? It's
training. Bar none. The people that operate these systems that are sharing public airspace with people that are in manned aircraft, balloons, or helicopters have to know and understand the airspace. I mean, where you guys are, you're in a very busy area. You've got Moose Jaw that's close by. You've got low-level flights. You've got high-level flights. It's important that the operators of these UAVs take some sort of training, that they understand airspace regulations. They have a healthy knowledge of the weather, communications, and rules and regulations, period. So there is an element of responsibility on the operator to get with the program because you're sharing public airspace. So there is a requirement to know, even though you're personally not up there.
Sterling, thank you.
Is that okay? Yeah, good. Well,
I'm glad
to have been a help, and hope you have a nice day.
You too. Bye-bye.
Okay.
That's Sterling Cripps. He is the Chief Operating Officer at Canadian Centre for Unmanned Vehicle Systems in Alberta.